So I'll do some quick introductions as well, and everyone's sitting in different positions, so I'll read and you can wave to make it easier. See Colonel Bob McLaughlin, the panelist, who is Chief Operating Officer of the Mount Carmel Center of Excellence, which was referenced earlier. Where else we have? That's the speaker. Andrew Hurst. Where's Andrew? There you are. Who's president of Colorado Technical University, which has a big presence right here, and he'll tell you all about a long history of these kinds of programs. Marady Leary, obviously in the middle. From the Chamber of Commerce Foundation, she's the Director of Education and Fellowships at Hiring Our Heroes. And finally, who am I missing? Alan at the end. Alan, who is Senior Vice President, Operations, Programs, and Entertainment at the USO. Entertainment's the fun part. Are you going on a tour soon?
It's all fun.
You going on any tours lately?
A couple.
Yeah.
And we're getting a couple of our senior leaders out on tours as we get closer to the holiday season. There'll be a lot of good opportunities for our troops out there.
I got to do one of those with Chairman Dempsey, with Jordan Sparks and Minka Kelly, Robert Ory, Big Shot Rob was out there, and a couple others. And we ended up, after a very long trip through Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan, twice through Kuwait, finally got to Germany, where they actually do serve alcohol. Yeah. Had a very nice, very long night where Robert Ory was very generous, and we all paid for it in the morning. Yeah. But it was a good show, and man, did the guys love it at Bagram. It was a really fun show, and Ramstein as well. So let's get to the community programs that we've heard about, and in a similar fashion, we have a similar amount of time. Give us, sorry, Jeff. One more. Sorry. I lost my. Okay, we'll start with you, Jeff. Tell us about your programs, and in a short amount, your elevator speech, and then we'll get to some discussion on best practices.
So I think I can actually skip the elevator speech because I'm the third Bush Institute person to speak today, President Bush, Miguel Howell, and myself. But my area of focus within the Institute is research and policy around education and employment, so kind of workforce development, and then nonprofit effectiveness and funder impact on nonprofits.
And Marine Corps retired?
Retired Marine Corps. Yeah. Excellent. Short career. I don't look that retired, do I? Hopefully.
Okay, go on.
Andrew Hurst, oversee CTU, or Colorado Technical University. We are a regionally accredited university. Our home campus is here in Colorado Springs. We have around 24,000 students. Around 1,200 of those reside here in the Colorado Springs community. We have another campus in Denver, and then the rest of our students are online all across the country and throughout the world. We offer associates, bachelor's, master's, and doctorate programs across business curriculum, criminal justice, cybersecurity, nursing, healthcare, engineering, computer science. We've been rated by the U.S. News and World Report as one of the best online deliverers of bachelor's programs and master's programs, best for vets. A number of years in a row, we're designated as a Center of Excellence by the NSA and DHS for cybersecurity. And about 25% of our total population, student population, is military related. Here in the Springs, that's nearly 70%.
Big number.
I'm Marady Leary, and I work on the corporate fellowship program here at Fort Carson and then also nationally. So it was alluded to a little bit earlier. It's an internship program, but we don't use the word internship. We call them fellows because they're very high caliber candidates, both for active duty service members and then also military spouses, which we're really excited about because we're one of the few programs that's addressing the needs of military spouses and their need for employment. And we operate here and in 9 other locations, and what we do is we take fellows and we put them into businesses before they're out, and we have them work on different projects or all sorts of things in a professional capacity, and it's resulted in 80% of them getting jobs, and the average salary is $70,000. So we're really happy with the program. Excited to see it grow.
Good. Colonel?
So I'm Bob McLaughlin, retired Army, a soldier for life. I had the opportunity to serve as the garrison commander on Fort Carson, and when you talk about this community, there's a sea of goodwill out there and you've probably seen it since you've been here, of organizations that want to do good things for the military. One of the things that I always asked when I was on the other side of the fence is, where's the place? Where's the one place where vets, troops in transition, and their families can go? Where's the beacon of support? So the beacon of support, the Mount Carmel Center of Excellence, was born from Jay Cimino, who's in the audience. I'd like to thank Jay publicly for his vision, and his daughter Gina, who's the president of the center. I serve as the chief operating officer. And what's so important about having a place, having the beacon of support, what we have learned is being able to bring in partners, focus on best practices, and you've heard these terms throughout the two-day seminar, but having the place, having the one stop, where we are partnered with the USO under one roof, where we are with Hiring Our Heroes, and the synergy that you get from having partners there. Miguel talked about the importance for job placement and public-private partnerships. Under our roof, there is a workforce center. So we have a one-of-a-kind workforce center that takes the existing big workforce center in Colorado Springs. It has a special satellite workforce center just for veterans and families. We have a great program, which you've probably heard in the last 2 days, called Peer Navigation, which is on the military installations, working with troops in transition. So under one roof, we have a very unique workforce center, public-private partnership. We also have a counseling center, which everyone talked about, which is very important for the hidden wounds. And it's very easy to get services there. So a combination of a workforce center, counseling for behavioral health, financial, educational, legal, all coming together to serve vets and their families. So although it's not unique and other organizations in the country do it, we're in a unique community here. We think that having the idea of a beacon of support partnered with the many other organizations in the community creates synergy, creates some addition to collective impact with public-private partnerships. So we're very proud of it.
Excellent. Alan.
So Alan Reyes, I lead our program activity at the USO, including our transition services, as we've coined it, the Transition 360 Alliance. I know JD spoke about it at the beginning of the program. I would just add, as it relates to community impact, we see our opportunity at the USO, whether it's here in the Colorado Springs and the Fort Carson area, or at many, many different locations that the USO serves alongside our service members and their families, that we have that opportunity to really bring those communities together, the providers in the communities, the fellow partners. As Bob mentioned, we work very closely with the Mount Carmel team here, with Hiring Our Heroes, with the Chamber. We make sure that we use that special access that we have with our service members and their families over this 75-year history to ensure that they know that this is a place that they can come, and that we can then convene the opportunity to bring other community providers, whether they're public, private, other nonprofits, into the mix. We're doing that quite well here again in Fort Carson, and replicating that across the country as we speak. I think I would add that, I know we're talking about community impact. I think one of the opportunities that we have as a USO in this space is to be able to really leverage the community of communities too. We all, as we're affiliated with the military, recognize the mobility of this workforce, and oftentimes people are making transitions in the communities that they are leaving, but they're also oftentimes making that transition to another location. And as we continue to work with network providers in various communities, we can actually start linking them together and creating that vast network where we can support those service members and their families making that transition into other locations and to other communities. Just to round it out, also a fellow a service member. I haven't transitioned yet, but I will soon. A reserve captain in the Navy for the next 2 weeks until they fire me and move me upstairs to the next rank. So that's me.
Congratulations, I think, is to that announcement.
Be careful what you wish for.
Right. Well, you're right in the middle of it. Colonel, let me start with you. We just heard the last panel talk a lot about what's going on now, and we have a new garrison commander and the uniqueness of this community. And so the sense this is about, connecting with community, state and local, and as even Alan's saying, folks who want to go elsewhere. What's changed since, when were you garrison commander, and what's changed since, and what have you seen?
Sure. First, from the inside out, the whole aspect that everyone's talked about with Soldier for Life is an incredible change. That Fort Carson and the other installations across the country have adopted a program that really focuses on helping the troops in transition. It's blossomed tremendously since I left in 2012, and the idea of connecting from in the installations to the outside is tremendously important. That's something we continue to get better at. Getting access to the troops before there's a crisis is something we collectively need to continue to do better at. My peer navigators are on the military installations working with the troops in transition, but the big change is the ability to focus on Soldier for Life for the Army and to gain more access for the many organizations that are outside of the gate trying to gain their way in. That's something we can continue to improve on.
So then, Andrew, with your university, so what have you seen change over the years as far as connecting with the folks in the military who are coming to you and their needs and the differences?
I think we've seen a continual increase in just the awareness of those who are exiting service, understanding the importance of higher education, not only sort of at an entry level, but as a
service members themselves.
Right? And so we've made sure that within our university that we're receptive to and able to understand the different issues that they will have as they enter into the institution or just into higher education in general. So we're very supportive there. I think we see a beginning of a change in the program selection, right, as industry changes, right? The traditional, business degree, where about 25% of our military students sit at the bachelor's level and about 6 or 7% at the graduate level are all in business administration. Then it's information technology and criminal justice. That's sort of been the traditional area of education. We're seeing a significant increase around cybersecurity, and then cybersecurity from an engineering standpoint. So it's not just the policy piece of that, but what does that look like underneath in terms of corporations. So I think we're seeing a more sophisticated soldier come to us, understanding that there's a lot of different. So I think there's a synergy here of all of these resources that are helping the service member understand the importance of not only an undergraduate degree, but perhaps even a graduate degree.
So, Jeff and Marady, then you kind of come in with how you're building newer programs and finding better programs and best practices that are emerging now in this new window, like you said, from 2014, I think you said, or 2012 to now. So in 4 years, a tremendous amount of growth and change. So where does that stand for you? What are the practices and that you're looking for or putting out there to keep this going?
So I think a few years ago, my old boss said to me, the veterans are drowning in a sea of goodwill. There's so many programs out there. They don't know what to navigate. And we're very much, when I worked at the Chicago Chamber in Voc Rehab, we were very much, these are our employers, these are our contacts, we're not going to share them. And that wasn't helpful to anybody. It wasn't helpful to the veterans, it wasn't helpful to the employers. And it was very difficult for the employers to navigate the programs as well and see what was working. So what we've done with the corporate fellowship program is we've said, okay, we know our role is to be the administrator of the program, but we need all of our community partners to make it happen. And so what we've done is we've worked with Bob and his team, we've worked with the education services officers, we've worked with the leadership over at Fort Carson and all of the employers in the area, and we all do our piece. We all do our one piece that we're good at, and we make sure that we collaborate so that the fellow has the best experience. We have, people from all over the area coming in and speaking to the fellows on Thursdays. We have an education track, we have a certification track, but it's not all done by hiring our heroes, it's done by the experts in the community. And so I think that collaboration is really the way of the future, so that people aren't confused and so that we pool our resources for the greater good.
So maybe, Jeff, that's a good segue to this idea of a roadmap. I mean, I hear a lot of collaboration is happening and it is needed, and there's greater outreach and there's less barrier off base and on base. It still sounds to me almost overwhelming. Like you said, this drowning in charity, or help, whatever it was. The idea that where do you start, where do you go, whether you're the business that wants to help or you're the transitioning, soldier, Marine, airman, sailor. So, what was your experience like? You're probably the most recent exeter of the service.
I've actually been out since 2008. So
have you?
Yeah, I'm coming up on my 10 year.
Okay.
No, but it was a lot different in 2008 than it is now.
Well, you tried to look young, so I gave you that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm bald, but I'm still young. No, my transition was interesting, I guess. 5 years ago, I was a truck driver working my way through college, and then I started my own construction company and finished school at Syracuse University, and then networked and somehow found my way here working for President Bush. So interesting at the time when I transitioned.
You jumped there. You went from I was a truck driver and I'm hanging out at Syracuse, and now I'm just working for President Bush.
I worked on a few congressional campaigns.
Did you drive your truck to the ranch? And
Yeah. I got lost. I landed there. I was like, "Do you ride bikes?" I'm like, "All right, I bike with you."
Hey, you're in. Did he give you a nickname?
No, I did some research work at Syracuse University that kind of led me to this. But
gotcha.
It was an interesting process. But at the time when I got out, there wasn't this process. There was a lot of resources out there, none that I probably knew of. I would love to be a slide in Jeff Cathy's slide deck right now. Is former machine gunner at the bottom of the screen, and now he's MBA from USC. But I didn't know about those at the time. So we've taken this idea and created a roadmap. So there are all these resources, but when do you utilize them? When is the best time to utilize Spencer's resources in the Chamber of Commerce and the USOs? So we've created this process map. Similar to when you're serving in the military, give me the basic, steps of this mission and I'll complete that mission. Well, we'll give you the basic steps, and then along the way, plug in those resources at the proper time. So you're getting the resume at the proper time, you're doing the networking at the proper time. So that's the idea of this roadmap. And now that we're dealing with this millennial population of veterans, we realize that a print version is probably never going to get read. It'll be, stabilizing their table so they can drink beers on a level table. So we're making this mobile optimized, and we're putting it on a digital platform. So it's not only is it now more user-friendly, but it can offer a tailored experience. So if you were a transitioning corporal or you're a transitioning lieutenant colonel, you'll be offered a different experience. If you're a transitioning corporal like myself and you want to work for NASA, chances are you probably need a college degree. Whereas if you're coming out of the space in the Air Force, you might be able to make that jump. So we're going to offer different paths to what you think success is.
So if I'm Corporal Barron and I'm coming out, where do I even start to get into your program? Is this something I have to go to the Bush Institute website, or is this going to
This is where the partnerships come in, because we realize
Explain
as
that.
the Bush Institute, we don't have the reach that the USO has and that the Chamber has. We're not on military installations. As you all saw today, this was the first time President Bush has been back. So this is going to be through partnerships, through these hiring initiatives, through some of these other partners like yourselves in the room to push this roadmap out, to offer it to these. Because it's not just for transitioning service members. We would love to only have it. If you can catch someone at the point of transition, you can solve a lot of problems later on in life with all these homeless initiatives and all these other things. We can solve that here, but this will also be you can be a veteran and use these as well. If you're transitioning to a new job, you can plug kind of back into this cycle. So that's where it's coming in. It's this partnerships of how we can push this digital platform.
So Alan, bring it to what the USO is trying to do. So it sounds like the goal, like has been said, was for anybody in the service they can walk into a USO around the world, wherever they are, and just kind of wherever they are in the process of transitioning, to have someone to connect to. Is that the the good enough singular entry point that makes all this easier for everybody, both the providers and the users?
Well, I think the access, if that's the question, is really, we're adding to the access to that wealth of information, that wealth of resources and programs that are out there. Okay. And I don't think that would ever supplant anything that we're doing in this collective community does to find ways to connect directly with those service members as they make that transition. the specific point about the USO and our opportunity to use that, our scale and our scope and our, we have over 180 locations around the world, to be able to, one, provide some direct services, particularly in those communities where there are large concentrations of service members making that transition, but also all of those other locations where they're serving, and they may not be making their transition from, but we're starting the awareness and the education process that much earlier. You even hear it yesterday at the Transition Summit on posts about the military, really the services themselves, making sure that those service members are starting to think about transition as they actually start their career, as opposed to waiting until that magical 12-month prior or 12-month post. So our opportunity to provide that level of context as they serve, as we are with them always by their side, is an opportunity to add to that awareness. The other point I'd add too for us, and things that it might add to that earlier question about how things have changed. Our efforts collectively, I think, have not only been focused in on the individual service member, but as the USO, we focus on our service members and our families, and then when we work with partners, we're looking for those partners that are helping us develop a holistic transition opportunity for our service members. So, we're obviously talking about employment here and educational opportunities, but there's so many other dimensions of transition that we all know as it relates to financial success, housing, veterans benefits, all of that. So being able to help them create that unique customized plan to be able to make that transition, and also think about it well before you're at, as we say in the Navy, in extremis, right? To be when it's too late. So being able to communicate that much earlier on is one of the things I think that has changed over the years.
So maybe then, Bob and Marady, what's your advice for the new businesses, new small businesses, or even organizations, associations that want to help, they want to get into this game and start to provide services or be a future employer? I mean, is it easy enough, or it seems a little still convoluted? How do you get involved? What are the steps to start doing what your groups have been able to do? Do they need to join the hire train movement? Do they need to link up with the local, big guns around who've been there for a while? What's your advice?
So the advice I have locally is get involved in the networks. We've put on several networking events for business owners to come in and connect to troops and veterans. The challenge out there is this. When someone gets their DD-214 and they've completed the program, say Soldier for Life, the challenge is if you're a soldier for life and you have a DD-214, you're not retired, you just served honorably or other than honorably, you need to have a soft landing place. What we are trying to do in this community with the partnerships is give a soft landing place like the Center of Excellence that has these programs. So businesses can connect to troops in transition as they're going through Soldier for Life, or there's a whole sea of troops out there that may have failed in their first job, may need another connection. So those organizations need to connect to organizations like Mount Carmel, like Transition 360, like Hiring Our Heroes. And we have a great venue to do that we have bi-monthly networking events. We bring in organizations to do that. And that's the key, linking up those in need with those who have the opportunity. And to me, linking up with organizations that are off the military installation is also critical as they go forward.
And I would say for employers who are interested in hosting a fellow, it's very easy. All I have to do is contact me and I can put them in contact with whoever the program manager is nationally or locally. Or they can go through Bob. Bob knows them as well locally.
But beyond doing that, talk about your experiences even creating this program. What are the barriers that might still exist that could be smoother?
I think that Spencer alluded to it. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get them into the companies and let them show what their experience is. A lot of the times we talk to recruiters and they'll look at a resume and they'll say, I have no use for somebody with this skill set. I need somebody with X, Y, and Z. And what we do is we say, well, take them for 3 months. They're still on active duty, or they're a spouse who is sponsored. They don't cost you anything. For 3 months, just let them work in your office. Let them show what they can do and see if you like them. And 80% of the time, they're like, this is amazing. I would have never known. Because that barrier is still there. So I think it's about education. Employers really need to take a chance and educate the recruiters that aren't familiar with military on what a good skill set is, what a translatable skill set is, And then, it's the job of the service members and the spouses to go out and advocate for themselves and join these programs and work with organizations here and do their part as well.
I've heard that for a long time. I mean, I did reports on just the transferability of certifications, real specific job certifications, whether you're in computer networking or welding, whatever it would be. I don't hear as much of that anymore. Is that because that maybe is not as much of a problem? And I definitely heard what you were saying of, you may be a gunner, but you're still a leader or you're a manager of some kind, and you just need to pick the field you want to go into. So is the certification still a problem? Maybe you see some of that with...
Yeah, so I think it's taking on a different direction today. It's, to use a more current term, I guess, it's becoming badging, right? It's showing competency in different areas, and that took the form of IT certifications back in the day. But now it's, do I have that competency to do that job, right? So it's not necessarily about completing a full bachelor's degree or master's degree. It's one of the things that we've done at CTU is we've worked to map the MOSs from service into course competencies, right? So we can shorten the path. So as that service member is perhaps working in an entry-level job or a second-level job, right? What they gained in the military, they can put into our institution and move faster towards a degree or test out. We have an adaptive learning platform. We have a program called Fast Track that allows students to be able to prove what they know for absolutely no cost. And this is something that last year our students saved over $22 million of tuition, right? Proving that they have competency in certain areas. So it shortens that path to that degree. So in some cases, the degree is closer than they might believe, but it's those competencies that will become critical in the next few years. And so we're looking now at ways that we can allow our students to leave, or not necessarily, we don't want them to leave our institution until they graduate, but be able to take away certified badging of the competencies that they have that employers are looking for. And it's just now beginning to take hold, that you can, it's something portable that I can take. It's not necessarily an external certification. It's an institution certification that you have a competency in that particular area.
I mean, that's fascinating, but it's very, that's a detail. That takes a lot of dexterity to sort that out, I would imagine, especially for a younger service member coming out. It's not a simple question of, should I go to school or should I try for a job, is it?
No, it's not. But what our students, our military students have told us time and time again is that, once they began the program, they understood fully the importance of finishing that program for the rest of their life, what it's going to do for them, right? It does, I believe the education does provide another soft landing area for them to get their footing, right? Whether they're in our classrooms or they're online, right? Because not everyone is going to be comfortable coming out of the military and sitting in a classroom environment. And that online environment does give them a very different playing field.
So let's get to questions soon, if you can think, and who has what. I'll ask one more. Back to Alan. Tell us a little bit more of the Transition 360 Alliance. Tell us some of the success stories of how it's working and how that can transfer to either other areas or other types of coalitions that want to do the same work.
Sure. I think I'd go back to the idea about making sure that you're looking across the portfolio of outcomes that you're trying to drive, right? Whether it's about employment, educational opportunities, make sure that you're looking at the other aspects of that transition, making sure that as you look to build those partnerships within those local communities, you're filling each of those spots, so to speak. And I think the other part of our alliance model, we've really been doing it for about a year and a half now, is that like anything, it's fluid and it's dynamic. As you mentioned earlier, you look at the course of the last few years and how things have changed in this space. That will continue to change. That change is going to continue. So you'll want to also continue looking at and evaluating where you need to take your partnerships, which ones you need to deepen, what areas do you need to look at to perhaps include new partners that bring different dimensions to your program. So for instance here, we started our Transition 360 Alliance with partners like Hire Heroes USA, Comfort for Military Kids, Stronger Families, and our RP6 teammates that have helped us build out this network transition sites at our USO centers. We've continued to build on that, and we started this partnership this year with hiring our heroes to really bring our opportunity to bring the USO services to a larger audience in collaboration with the chamber. So being able to continually evaluate where you want to take that alliance or that partnership next, I think is one of those best practices that I talked about here.
One of the talking points that they gave me before this was the number of nonprofit organizations that provide services, even with the other installations, but it's got to be quite different at a place like we heard earlier with Southern California, in Pendleton, or if you're at Bragg, or if you're at, I don't know, Elmendorf, name the base. Do you find it, I mean, how much does it matter if it's service specific versus whatever the missions are for that base particularly?
Really shouldn't make a difference. It all depends on what the skill sets are.
Right.
What my peer navigators are finding is some of the skill sets that are coming out of your airmen are different than coming out of soldiers. We don't have as many Marines and Navy in the area, but we're servicing them all. They all come out with a different base skill set, but they all have the same soft skills of leadership, experience, the things that the president talked about. The ability to take charge, the ability to be motivated, the ability to work with the team. All those things are common.
Okay, others? While they're thinking, I'll jump back to you. Tell us about when you created this roadmap, the challenges of getting it done, and how is it something that you could see being replicated for other organizations to have a similar type of steps throughout, or did you base it off other models?
I think it was kind of a culmination of multiple models. One of the hardest parts was finding the proper resources, because there are, like you said, 46,000 nonprofits out there. If you take away the Legions and VFW Post, I think it's somewhere around 15,000 nonprofits that are super veteran, but it's still a large group you could get your hands around. And then what at scale can they actually do? So I'm from Syracuse, New York. An organization in California might not be able to help me. So how do we actually geolocate that? I think that's what this conversation was about at the community level, is where those services need to take place. There's some great national organizations, but they really aren't touching to the small communities where these veterans are relocating. So that was one of the largest challenges, and we're still going to struggle with that, but being able to plug into other networks, like Unite Us has a technology platform that has pretty much mapped all of the veteran nonprofits. So that being an off-ramp saying, okay, you live in small town Syracuse, New York, check out Unite Us and you'll be able to find your local nonprofits, because we just don't have the ability to map all of those ourselves. And it's already been done, so we do our part, someone else is doing that part, we'll just link to them. There's no reason for us to mission creep and do something. And that's kind of this whole conversation on collaboration. Do what you do best, let others do what they do best, and just refer your veteran or service member to those other organizations.
Is geography as important for higher education community?
Given that we consume everything today on a mobile device, I would say not. I would say we've seen great success with our students in the last 8 months when we custom built a new mobile app for our students. Right, so we've got 22,000 online students all over the world, and the level of engagement that has increased, the retention levels that have increased, because we have put something where they can learn when they want to, versus I've got to go. It used to be, it was convenient because you went and got on a computer. Now that's a drag, right? I mean, it's a total drag, right? So think about going to school online now. It's sort of I call it the old world of going online, where you read your materials or whatever, you do the assignments and you turn them in, and then you wait for the instructor to grade them, and that might occur in 48 hours. But you got to log in to the system and then go check the grade book, right? And then try to find the comments from the instructor, right? That's the way it is in a lot of schools that teach online today. For CTU students, the minute their assignment is graded, they're pushed a notification. They can look at their phone, they can see what the grade is, and they can see the comments from their instructor, right? If they get feedback from an instructor or from another student on something that they posted, it pops on their phone. They can use their thumbprint to get in and go right to the class and then respond, right? So that we consume so much today instantaneously, right? And we're learning constantly. I probably learn more now than I've ever learned in my life because I'm walking around with a device and someone asks a question, right? Everyone tries to get the answer first. I'm going to talk and laugh when I get it. I'm going to go. I got a better app, right? But that's changing the way we learn, right? And so the more we can empower our students to learn where they want to, it becomes less obtrusive and less challenging for them, right? Because we're putting it there. So I think that's where our institution has tried to be so responsive to our students, and our veteran students are such a large population. We want to be dialed in with that. So the geography piece, I believe, is going away from an education standpoint, but then the employment piece is where we've got to have the collaboration and then be able to put that skill set, right? So if I've got that competency that I've learned, how do I pass it into the corporate community, and then that person locally who's looking to hire sees that I've got that competency and reaches out to them.
I just remember walking through the snow to my professor's office, to the door, to the paper to find my grade, and a push notification for the nice. I hope that's front and center in your recruiting materials. So, Marady, this makes me think of the fellowship program, and we've heard in the last couple of years from the Secretary of Defense about trying to find a lot more options and flexibility, not just for transitioning, but for folks who are mid-career level types of fellowships as well, for going both directions. People in the service can go out to the private sector, and vice versa, especially in this cyber realm that they're pushing in Silicon Valley. Is that where do you guys fit into that vision, and how does it help the idea of wanting to actually retain people who aren't necessarily about to transition, but just trying to make sure that more folks in the military, particularly I think senior enlisted and junior officer ranks, start to get that experience in the private sector well before the end of their terms?
Part of the reason the program was created is because we were doing these hiring events, and people would go and they would get a job and they would leave 3 weeks later, 6 months later, a year later, and when we would go back and talk with them about why they left, they'd say it wasn't for me. And that burned the employer, it burned the veteran or the spouse. It was a bad engagement overall. And so what we've done is we've created a program with the help of our partners where we get that engagement where it's kind of a no risk. The garrison commander at Fort Hood told all the employers when we launched it, it's a try it before you buy it kind of program. He's like, you get a 3-month test drive of a military spouse or an active duty service member without the obligation. And so in terms of retention, it's been great for retention because when somebody is at your company for 3 months, you know whether you want to hire them or not. And they know whether they want to stay there or not. And so it's a really good fit because after 3 months, if they get hired, they're staying, probably longer than 6 months or a year or 2 years. And a lot of the fellows that we placed, we just started the program in 2015, so we don't have a lot of data. But most of the fellows that we placed in 2015 are still in their company of choice where they were placed into. Or we worked with Bob on one fellow who went through the program and realized this company isn't for me. Bob hooked him up with his dream job, and now he's at his dream job, but it was still a collaboration in finding out what am I interested in, what am I not interested in. And so even when we see people not get hired by their host companies and go somewhere else, we consider that a success because they're finding out what they want to do.
How long are the fellowships again?
12 weeks.
12 weeks, that's it.
Yeah.
And how near are those to somebody's actual end of term?
How near are they to what?
So if I'm the transitioning soldier, at what point in my career, how much time left? Is it the actual last 3 months? Or
yeah, it's usually your last few months. So everybody who's within 180 days of transition.
Right.
So, and most of them, we try to take them at those very last, months, so that when an employer offers them a job, they're not saying, well, hang on 3 months and then I'll accept the position, because we started that when we first started the program, and employers were saying, why would we host a fellow that we can't hire for 3 more months? And so now we've made the timeline much closer to when they're going to be getting out.
Interesting. Is there any effort or desire to push that back earlier before their exit time?
Is there a desire to push?
To be maybe not at the very end of your term, but give yourself a little bit more time, maybe a year, maybe even earlier.
No, we don't think that that would be good because we're asking these employers to hire them. And an employer has to forecast that they have an open position for this fellow at the end of the fellowship. So an employer can't forecast for a year from now, oh, I'm going to have, maybe they can, but most of them can't. So we're asking them to do a timeline that works for both of them.
I'm saying this to distinguish between what the Secretary of Defense is talking about, which are really more like 1 year leave of absence, almost like a leave, to take your 1 year from the Navy, go to Silicon Valley, not the intention of leaving the Navy going to be hired, but just to get that experience and come back in. Or they talk about exchange programs out there.
Yeah.
Versus, they said fellowships too, the same word for this, which is the actual end of your term for the purpose of staying.
Exactly.
Job as well.
Exactly.
So how many, what's your capacity, and what's the growth look like for the future?
So we do a class size of anywhere from 20 to 30 at each location 3 times a year. The reason that we keep the class sizes smaller is because we work with each of them individually. So each of them have an individual employer who we have to check in with. They're all on their individual certification tracks. So if we get too big, we're not going to be giving them the service that they deserve. We're right now in 9 locations, but we're looking to expand as far as we can. We're working on an enterprise MOU with IMCOM right now. We're working with the Air Force. We're currently launching at Camp Pendleton. We're working with Marines. We haven't worked with the Navy yet, but I'm certain that will happen. And so we're growing gangbusters right now. And the inclusion of military spouses is really important because we know that spouses need these opportunities just as much as the transitioning service members.
Good. That's right here.
President Hurst, does the college have visibility on Corporal Cleland's paper when he leaves the Marine Corps? And by that I mean, when he does leave, he's got a record besides the DD-214 called a VMed, or the Verification of Military Education and Training. And so the DoD tracks him, the service tracks him all the way through his career for his military occupational specialty and the soft skills that we mentioned earlier, leadership and commanding a battalion or a platoon or a company, so forth. And then when he leaves, the day he walks out the door, he gets that piece of paper and it's coded by Department of Labor and OPM, Office of Personnel Management, and it says these codes correlate to civilian work. So the GI Bill graduation rate could probably improve, and I'm just wondering if there's some efficiencies that might be gained on the intake process as the door from the DoD to the college campuses. Thank you.
So we do have access to that as it comes, and that's what we've done in terms of trying to map. We've taken a series of those that we have seen from our existing students, and to pre-map as many of those as we possibly can. It's impossible really to have an initiative to map every single code that's out there, but it's our goal to move through. If we haven't already reviewed that and then mapped those competencies into our courses, then we would do it on an individual basis for that particular individual. On an average, we are able to save a student anywhere from 18 to 38 credits, depending upon the programs that they come into. That can shave a year or two maybe off of their program. As I mentioned before, we also have the fast track program that allows them to take an adaptive challenge exam and place out of additional courses. So, we still need to make sure that we're solving for that individual that's coming out of the service that has that competency, right? And not every institution is that friendly in terms of trying to look at that, right? Versus we won't accept those credits, or we're not going to take the time to review those competencies.
So, Alan, talk about transferability from community to community and what plans are for this, this is a USO-centric event. From a large community of military, like a place like this, to smaller places, maybe in Pensacola or other areas, what can be done to, and we hear a lot about the communities here reaching out to their own individual groups, but to some of Colorado to help give best practices to California or Alaska or somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? You think about the unique needs of each of those communities. You pick up some place like Pensacola, Florida, the economic situation there is much different than, say, even here in Colorado Springs. There are a lot of different dynamics that have to come into play. So, I think the transfer of best practices, you have to be really careful, to be quite frank, to say not everything's going to work in every place that you go. So I think you have to approach that with that sort of healthy skepticism and say, well, what is it that's happening here in Colorado Springs? For instance, we continue our efforts to work with the partners here in Colorado Springs, and how did that translate to what we'll eventually do in Pensacola, Florida? We're not there yet in terms of our transition services because we want to go to the largest communities first. But as we get there, the question is really going to be, well, how do you translate that? And you have to think about the different factors that are involved there. And I mentioned economics, but there's certainly many other things to think about there in terms of, what are the opportunities for the veterans in particular communities for employment, for education, and all the other dimensions. And so you want to be able to make sure that you're tailoring your analysis on what's unique to the place that you're going to. So a lot of opportunities to talk about best practices and broadcast them out. But really when you're receiving those best practices, you kind of have to filter out and say, well, what is it that is unique about what we do here in our community? And how does that really, how does that impact the level of maturity, if I could say, of the collaborative nature of the community and all the service providers? We talked about, if you think about 46,000 or 15,000, depending on how you cut the number of organizations that serve the military and our veteran space, that really introduces a large variation in how collaborative all those can be. So you have to really kind of understand how your particular community is working, and then understand where you are in that maturity curve and say, well, I can take that back from a particular area, like I'd say Colorado Springs, where the level of maturity is much, much higher.
Maturity is a good word for it. I mean, I'm thinking of the idea of, again, a business owner or a community organizer of some kind that wants to get into this field and start to help. And where do they begin? And they may know VFW, they may know American Legion, but they may not know the Hire for Heroes Foundation Project, and they may not know Bush Institute, Veterans Roadmap, and these wonderful initiatives among the 40,000 as we talked about. Is it the kind of thing when you see there's a need for, sending out community organizers, you need a singular, clearinghouse of transition programs person to go, community to bring people together? Or is it happening more organically where they're latching onto maybe these pre-existing community networks, like you say, of different levels of maturity?
I mean, we found it happens in very different ways in different communities. So in California, for instance, in San Diego, there's a group there that has done a lot of work in transition, but it hasn't been one single organization. I mean, it's been this collective, if you will. And so as that community has gelled, there's different norms, different ways that they've come together. In other places, I think you can find that singular sort of one convener that has a leadership position has been able to advance the opportunity to be the convener of everyone else, and then that becomes a lot more, a lot more.
Is it the base? Is that help?
Sometimes it's the base. Oftentimes, you look at the installation, you look at the installation leadership, and say, hey, are we really committed to making sure our service members are making that transition? That's largely, I would say, when you look at large installations like you have here at Carson, that tends to be the case.
Questions are in the last 10-minute window-ish, so we'll go back to the corner. And I don't want to tell us some of the mistakes that you guys see that companies or organizations make in trying to do the good work that they're trying to do. We'll start.
Thank you. My name is Ed Cody. I'm with Pentagon Federal Credit Union. I'm curious, Colonel Fitch mentioned there's a warrior transition unit here at Fort Carson, and I'm concerned about how this program might work for wounded, ill, and injured recovering service members. How does the community get together with them earlier in their recovery process? Because as you know, they may not be able to do what they were trained to do in the military, or they may no longer want to do that. And I can certainly thank President Hurst, a couple of folks that I was working with at Walter Reed went through your program and were very successful. But is there an opportunity, Marady, to do sort of fellowships while they're recovering vis-a-vis Operation Warfighter?
I think there is an opportunity, and we originally started working with Justin Constantine about a year ago when the fellowship, or 2 years ago when the fellowship concept came to us, and it was going to be designed specifically for that population. We see that about 30% of the fellows that are currently in the program are going through some sort of VA disability rating, or they've already gotten it, or they're in the process. But I think that's something where we need to collaborate even further on to maybe even provide a subsector of what we're working with because of the special circumstances that we'll have around that, and create a program specifically for that group of people. So that's something that, obviously we need to develop more. The fellowship is just getting off the ground, and so we're trying to build it and make it a strong program, but we're always looking for ways to expand it and make it better.
I'd like to add to that. Colonel Fitch mentioned the Soldier Family Assistance Center, the SFAC. So the SFAC is kind of the place to connect with the wounded warriors. We actually have an AW2 office in our building, so we connect, our peer navigators connect with the wounded warriors on post, and then we have their organizations off post as well. So it's a double approach where we can go into the Soldier Family Assistance Center and connect with those wounded warriors, and they can come off post. And there's wounded warriors who aren't necessarily able to go back on the installation readily, so they can come to our place as well. I'd like to make a comment also about what we think is a best practice. Ann and I talked earlier about how the national reach of these organizations, community-based, and how community-based organizations like Mount Carmel come together so that there's a national reach and a community focus. And if we can get other communities to do the same, because frankly, there are some communities out there that are intimidated. Other nonprofits get intimidated by the national reach organizations. And we think it's a best practice for local organizations. And we're actually going to go on a campaign with some organizations to show them this best practice. To have a place where the organizations can meet together in a thriving community or a lesser community is critical. You mentioned earlier that they need to know where to go. We think that in Colorado Springs, we have several initiatives that focus on collaboration. Mount Carmel is one of them that we think is important for the veterans, family members, and troops in transitions to come to. We also have an organization called the Peak Military Care Network that helps connect other nonprofits. So we think we want to export these best practices. And this community is a place to set an example to do that.
One more comment on that. On the Wounded Warrior piece, so we're in our 9th year going through the selection process right now of our Wounded Warrior Scholarship Program. For 8 years, it has provided 50 full scholarships annually for a total cost of over $6 million that we've invested in that program since it began. So these are 50 full scholarships to either a wounded warrior spouse, or caregiver. They can select any program in our curriculum, associates, bachelor's, master's, or doctorate. It's a full ride. They're able to defer their benefits, their educational benefits, and pass them on to a family member. We give them a free laptop, and then they have their own support team of coaches and counselors that work with them as they progress through. And we just had our annual ceremony, commencement ceremony in Denver back in July, and I believe we had about 8 or 9 graduates that came through at a special reception for them. But that is a program that we are very committed to. We won't ever walk away from that program. And it shows that, those individuals, and the stories are heart-wrenching when you read the applications, and we have to select that 50 out of a pool of maybe 200 or 300, right? But they've found a new direction in their lives, and they persevere, and it's just great to see them come through.
We're under 5 minutes, and a couple of times recently we've mentioned spouses and families. I don't think we've spoken enough about them, and particularly any programs that are geared for them or needed to be geared for them. And in the bios, you see, Mary, you are a spouse of a now veteran that is out, right? So tell us about your transition experience yourself, or perhaps what you're hearing or seeing. That what is the need right now for spouses, either gender, and families coming out?
I think that, what we've seen even with the corporate fellowship program of people applying is that spouses move from location to location to location on their resume. When somebody looks at that and they see all of these different jobs that are, in all these different places, they don't think, oh, that was a military spouse. They might even have it on their application or their resume, but they're thinking this person can't keep a job, or this person, is moving all over the place. And so the unemployment rate for spouses right now is what, Liz, 25%? At about 25%. which is staggering. And so what we want is we want to see more companies raise their hand and say, hey, I'm willing to take a military spouse. And unfortunately, when we launched the spouse program at Fort Hood, we only had one employer say, I want to take a spouse. And the majority of employers told us, well, how long are they going to be here? And when is their husband or wife going to PCS? And we don't want to hire somebody who's just going to leave. Luckily for Liz and I, the Chamber has created a portable job for us. So if Liz moves, or even when I moved from Chicago to Las Vegas, they said it's okay, you can work from home and then travel. Most companies aren't as forward thinking as the Chamber, and I thank God for the Chamber that we've been able to keep our jobs. But a lot of spouses don't have that, so we really need employers to have portable jobs, to have flexible jobs, and to be willing to take somebody who might only be there for 18 months, but then would also be willing to move with the company. And I think Liz could probably speak to this much more than me. She's the director of our spouse program. She's right over there if people are interested in talking to her, signing on. But it's a huge need for the community.
But that sounds more of those who are in the service versus and still moving around versus coming out for good.
Or even people coming out for good. It's the same issues.
Yeah. Okay. We're under 2 minutes. Last questions for anyone? Under the lights, I can't even see who it is. Of course it's Brad.
How's everybody doing
Great.
this evening? I just want to thank everybody for actually coming out here. I'm Bernard Edwards, one of the 3 veterans you saw in the video. I know I've got the baby face going on now, nice and shaved up. And also we have Helen Chandler here, one of the other veterans. And really I just want to touch on why we're all here. I believe that everyone in this room has a vision that one day we'll have no jobless veterans, we'll have 0 homeless veterans, and we'll have 0 veterans committing suicide each day. And so I just want to give everybody a round of applause. The USO, Hiring Our Heroes, George W. Bush Institute, and all the other partners. Fort Carson also.
It's a good. This is all about perspective, and I'll wrap similar to how I began. I'm a journalist. I'm a national security reporter. I've been covering the Pentagon for a decade now, so I get it. I'm in the community, even though I'm an outlier of sorts of what's going on here. And I've seen the perceptions change as well across the country about what to do with veterans and where things go. To me, this continuum of changes, again, of what services are needed is, I would just emphasize, as the reporter from Washington, are so directly connected to the policies of Washington, the wars that are being fought, the national security decisions, and what the military has to do by their leaders, and how it has changed, how it's built, and the people that make up the military, how it's composed. So I think we've heard a lot of good perspectives today that things are much changed in just the last 3, 4, 2, 5 years, much less 10 or 20 years ago. They're much better, they're much more crowded, they're much more complicated. And so hopefully you all have learned something. I know I have, and I'm sure our panelists have, and hopefully a lot of connections will be made, and you can make them over drinks after this, which is even better. And I don't know if I'm the very last person before drinks. Is someone else going to dismiss? Okay, so we have one more speaker to come, so I'll close by saying thank you for having me here. It's been enlightening, and hopefully I can do my part too to get some news coverage and attention on these continuing issues. Big round of applause for our panelists.